Today we're going to work on Lesson 9 problem set, and it is all about finding related multiplication facts by adding and subtracting equal groups in array models. So, let's see what number 1 has in store. The team organizes soccer balls into 2 rows of 5. The coach adds 3 rows of 5 soccer balls. Complete the equations to describe the total array. So you'll notice for the problems that we're going to do, we're going to work on using 2 different arrays, but then we're going to talk about that array as a whole. So one method that we have here is method A, and it has 5 plus 5, so 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5. So you can see that the parentheses are around my first array and my second array. Okay, so this is the repeated addition method. So all I have to do is add all of those 5s. 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5. And instead of adding all of those, we know from skip counting I can do 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. Okay. Next one, 2 5s. Well, in my first array, I have 2 rows of 5, which gives me 2 5s. And then in my second array, I have 1, 2, 3 rows of 5, which gives me 3 5s. 2 5s plus 3 5s is how many 5s? Now this confuses people sometimes. You kind of want to think of your 5s as like apples. So I can say 2 apples plus 3 apples is 5 apples. So 2 5s plus 3 5s is 5 5s. My last method, I can just write a multiplication sentence that describes my whole entire array. So if I were to squish these two together, I would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 rows of 5 is 5 times 5. 5 times 5 is 25. Okay, so I have a few different ways that I can look at those. So let's remember those methods as we go down to number 2. Number 2, you can see my 2 different arrays this time are denoted by the darker shade of gray and the lighter shade of gray. So the problem we're trying to solve here is 7 times 2. Now we've learned a lot of strategies so far on how to solve 7 times 2, but what we're working on now is learning another one. So what we can do for 7 times 2, instead of multiplying by 7, I can multiply by 5 and by 2. And to do that, I break my array down into 5 rows and 2 rows. So now I have a 5 times 2 array and a 2 times 2 array. So let's use those to help us figure out 7 times 2. 5 times 2 is 10. 2 times 2 is 4. So down here you can see in my box it's already got 10 plus 4. 10 plus 4 is 14. So, what was I multiplying by 2 for my whole entire array? 7 rows of 2 equals 14. So 7 times 2 equals 14. Sometimes the different steps in the boxes can get confusing, so just try to use your array to help you. Let's practice another one. This array is a 9 times 2, or a 9 by 2 array. 9 rows of 2. Now this method, when I'm using a times 9, I can use 10 rows, and then I can take away one of my rows. Because, if you notice, 10s, 5s, and 2s are all of our skip counting facts. So later, when we're doing problems that involve factors other than 2 and 3, so for example factors like 8 and 7, those ones that are a little bit harder to skip count, these strategies are really going to come into play then, because we're going to want to break our numbers down into problems that are easier for us to use. So these are 2 strategies that you're definitely going to use later on. And we'll practice them then too. Okay, so if I'm multiplying by 9, well, I probably don't want to skip count by 9s because that's kind of tricky. Some of us might be learning our 9s trick, but a strategy I can use is to multiply by 10. Multiplying by 10 is something that I may be a lot better at than multiplying by 9. So, when I multiply by 10, I'm instead of doing 9 times 2, I'm doing 10 times 2. Well, 10 times 2, or 10 plus 10, is 20. Okay, and then I add that extra array, the extra row down at the bottom, so you can see that my 10 times 2 is my whole thing. But I want to get rid of that extra row because I don't really need it. So 1 row of 2 is 2. So now what I'm going to do to figure out my answer, 20 minus that extra row, which was 2, equals 18. So 9 times 2 equals 18. And I can write it up here at the top too. Okay? And as we practice this more, you'll get a little bit more comfortable with it, and then we'll really practice it later whenever we're working on our other facts. Okay, let's go to page 2. Matthew organizes his baseball cards in 4 rows of 3. Draw an array that represents Matthew's cards using an X to show each card. Okay, so it's really important that we follow the directions on this one because you notice this problem has an A and a B. Okay, and all of the problems on this whole page are going to end up going together. Okay, so it's really important that we follow all of our directions. Let's draw our array. 4 rows of 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so I have 4 rows with 3 in each row. Notice I didn't use all my workspace because I know I'm going to have to add to it later. Part B wants us to solve an equation to find his total number of cards. So 4 rows of 3, 4 times 3, 3, 6, 9, 12. 4 times 3 is 12. That's all for part 4. Let's go down to part 5. Matthew adds 2 more rows. Use circles to show his new cards. Okay, so we're going back up to this array that we've already done. And we're going to add 2 more rows onto this array. And we're going to use circles to show that it's different. If you want to, you can change your pen to a different color so you can see that they're different. Whatever helps you see that this is adding to what we already have. So 2 more rows. Alright, so there's our 2 rows. And they still have 3 in each row because he's doing the exact same thing. He's adding 2 more rows. Your size of your rows aren't going to change. So now we need to write and solve a multiplication equation to represent the circles we added. Okay, so we're just doing the circles that we added. We added 2 rows of 3. So 2 times 3 is 6. Okay, now we need to add the totals from the equations in problem 4b, so right here, whoops, right here, and 5a, right here, to find Matthew's total cards. So 4a is 12, because that is from our first array. 5a is 6. That's from our second array, the parts that we added. 12 plus 6 is 18. And the last thing we're going to do is to write a multiplication equation that shows his total number of cards. So if I'm looking for his total number of cards, my array needs to be the whole entire thing, all put together. So how many total rows do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 rows with 3 in each row. 6 times 3 is 18. That's all for this lesson for today. Now, it seems like it went pretty quickly because it did, but it's also kind of a tricky concept. You're going to need to know how to do problems just like this. They're going to come up again very, very soon. So please make sure that you understand what we just did on this problem on this second page. All these problems on page 2. Okay, you need to know how to do all of this stuff here. So if you need to watch this part of the video again to see it again, please do. It's always here for you to do that. You can always come back and watch it again. Okay? And don't forget that you can use the problem sets that we do to help you with your word work assignments the next day. It's always a great resource for you to reference because they're very similar to one another. Don't forget to save your work. You can title this one M1L9 and come back and look at it later if you need to. Good work today.